let's take a look at the final factoring problems from the homework from section 2.5. And for question number 6, I need to continue factoring each polynomial, and we need to assume that the m and n variables are all natural numbers. All right, so these are some very good combination factoring questions. So let's get started with some of these. And basically, with all the homework questions on section 2.5, we will be using the smiley face factoring technique. So let's go ahead and look for two numbers that multiply to 4. So I have 2 and 2. And then I need two numbers that multiply to 25. And since my middle number is negative 20 here, both numbers should be negative when I look for numbers that multiply to 25. So let's use -5 and -5. Okay, now using the smiley face technique here, 2 times -5 is -10, and 2 times -5 is -10, and -10 minus 10 gives me -20, so that's the right combination. Let's go ahead and set up the brackets now. So when we're setting up the brackets, we do have a little bit more work to do for these problems here, but let me start off with the first two numbers here, so 2 and 2. So I have a 2x and a 2x, and this first 2 multiplies with a -5, so I need a -5 here, and that means this inside multiplication here, I can put a -5 over there. Okay, so now let's take a look at the variables here. I have x to the 2m, and 2m is the same thing as m plus m. So let's put a m here and an m there. So if I multiply those two terms when I do my first FOIL step, 2xm times 2xm. Remember, if the variables are the same, or the bases are the same, you just add the powers when you're multiplying with exponents. So m plus m is 2m, so that works. And then finally over here, I have a y to the power 2n, and 2n is the same thing as n plus n. So I need a y here and a power of n, and a y here and a power of n. And that should do it for that first problem. All right, so we're still using the smiley face technique, and we just need to add a few more variables in there so that the factoring works out correctly. Okay, let's move on to letter B now. All right, for letter B, let's go ahead and look at the first number, 10. Okay, there's a 10 there, there's a 4 here, and there's a 6 there. So before I can apply the smiley face factoring technique, there is a common factor. So let's go ahead and factor out the 2 first. So 2 is the greatest common factor here. So if I factor out the 2, I get 5x to the 2m. Sorry, 5x to the 2m minus 2xm yn minus 3y to the 2n. All right, so that's step number 1. We factor out the 2. Then after that, we go back to the smiley face factoring technique. So I need to find two numbers that multiply to 5. So I'm thinking of 1 and 5, and I need two numbers that multiply to -3. Now the middle number is a negative sign, so one number will be positive and one number will be negative when I'm looking for the two numbers that multiply to -3. So this will be a -3, and that will be a 1. All right, so if I use the smiley face technique here, 1 times 1 is 1, and 5 times -3 is... Actually, that combination will not work. So let me try something else here. Let me try -1. Whoops. Let me try a -1 and a 3. Okay, so maybe this will work now. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 5 times -1 is -5. And if I combine -5 and 3, I definitely get -2. So that works. Okay, so let me erase this, and let's go ahead and set up the brackets now. So 2 sets of brackets. And let me get my green marker here. So I have a 1 and a 5. So I will put a 1x here and a 5x there. And remember, this 1 was multiplying with the 3. So I need to put a 3 over here. And that means this -1 will be on the inside there. Okay, after that, we just need to modify our answer here. Remember, there's a 2 out here, so let's go ahead and put the 2 out there. And then after that, let's take a look at the exponents now. Okay, let me get a purple marker here. I have x to the 2m, right? So 2m is the same thing as m plus m. So I need an m here and an m there. And I have a y to the 2n here, and 2n is the same thing as n plus n. So I need a y to the n and a y to the n over here, and this is a plus sign. All right, so that's my final answer for letter B. Okay, so we move on to letter C now. All right, so for letter C, now we're starting to get into some of the more trickier problems because we need to factor out a greatest common factor, but now we're also dealing with negative signs. So let's go ahead and factor out a negative 2. And if I factor out a negative 2, I get 2 to the x to the 4m plus 3x to the 2m y to the 2m. I'm out of space here, so let's erase that bracket. And then this will be minus 2y to the 4m. All right, so at this stage, you have to be pretty good with factoring out a common factor, whether it be positive or whether it's a positive or negative number. And since we're dealing with a negative sign here, remember the signs will change to the opposite sign. And you can always distribute to check to see if your answers are correct or not. Okay, now let's go ahead and use the smiley face technique here. So I need two numbers that multiply. Let me use a purple marker here. I need two numbers that multiply to this 2. So I'm thinking of 1 and 2. And I also need two numbers that multiply to that negative 2. So I'm thinking of 2 and minus 1. Okay, so if I do my smiley face technique, that's negative 1. And 2 times 2 is 4. And definitely 4 minus 1 gives me the middle number 3. So that works. All right, so let me just go ahead and start opening up the brackets now. Okay, so I need two sets of brackets. I have a negative 2 to start, and let's go ahead and do the two brackets there. Let me get out my green marker. I have a 1 and a 2, right? So this will be 1x and a 2x, and this 1 multiplies with this negative 1, so that will mean there's a negative 1 here, and that means that there'll be a positive 2 over here. Great, and then we just kind of finish this problem off by looking at the powers here. So I have a 4m, right? So 4m is the same thing as 2m plus 2m. So I need a 2m here and a 2m there. And I have a y to the 4m there. So over here I would probably need, 4m is the same thing as 2m plus 2m. So I need another y to the 2m here and a y to the 2m there. And that should complete the factoring for that problem. All right, so there's definitely some hard problems on question number 6. And the last question I'll be doing is question number 3 here. So let me go down to question number 3 here. And since I'm out of space here, I'll have to erase some of the work here. I like question number 3 because this is another good question where you need to think about what is the greatest common factor. So this one's a bit of a tough one here because you do need to rewrite this as 3x to the n times x squared plus 4x to the n times x to the 1 minus 4x to the n. All right, so this expression right here in yellow and this part here in yellow, remember, if you're multiplying and the bases are the same, you're just adding the powers. So this is really the same thing as x to the power of n plus 2, which is really that part right there. So what you're doing is you're taking this green part and you're breaking it up into two sections, or two parts, two individual parts. And when you do that, you'll notice that every single term now has an x to the power of n. So that is our greatest common factor. So we need to pull that out as x to the n. And then what's left over? Well, I have 3x squared plus 4 times x to the 1 minus 4. All right, so the challenge with that problem is recognizing what the greatest common factor is, and the greatest common factor is x to the n. After that, you're just using the smiley face technique now. So two numbers that multiply to 3, 1 and 3. Two numbers that multiply to negative 4. And since this is a positive number here, one number will be negative and one number will be positive when you're breaking down negative 4. So let's use 2 and negative 2. And if I do 1 times negative 2, I get negative 2. And if I do 3 times 2, I get a 6. And 6 minus 2 definitely gives me the positive 4. All right, so I'm in pretty good shape here. Let's go ahead and finish off the problem. This is x to the n, two brackets. And we've done this enough times where I use my first two numbers over here, 1 and 3. So this will be 1x and a 3x. The 1 multiplies with the -2, so follow that through, -2, and that means this has to be +2, and that's your final answer there. All right, so that concludes this homework video guide on the factoring questions on number 6 from section 2.5.